So moving forward, we're dropping the 2 and continuing simply as Overwatch.
They're dropping the 2 and going back to just Overwatch. And that's obviously not all Blizzard announced during the Overwatch 2 spotlight. But this isn't meant to just be a coverage video on the 5 new heroes, new UI, new events, role changes, balance adjustments, and so on. I want to discuss this. Them officially dropping the 2 from the name. Because this isn't just them announcing a new era for the game. This is Blizzard finally admitting that Overwatch 2 was a failure, that they're moving past it and they're going forward with a bang. But why? Why was Overwatch 2 such a failure? And before y'all come blasting me in the comments with, it's because of the PvE, bro. Yeah, we know the PvE is a large factor, okay? But there's a lot more going on. From the PvE to the esports to a company-wide lawsuit and acquisition. So in this video, we're going to sit down and discuss one of the worst gaming sequels ever in multiplayer gaming, and the end of an era and why Overwatch 2 failed. To start and be able to really understand why we're now in the position we're in, we got to go back to 2019. Before COVID, I was still in high school and my team won the NBA championship, quick flex. And when the Overwatch 2 announcement trailer was unveiled at 2019 BlizzCon. Overwatch up to this point is a staple in gaming, the go-to hero shooter and the 2016 game of the year. And though it had been rough in some points, really rough, regardless of what people say, those who were around back then know Overwatch was the shit. So a sequel was naturally gonna generate some buzz, and it did more than just buzz. They really just had us by the balls. This game looks so tough. They announced it with a cinematic, a PvE with skill trees, expanded PvP content. It looked like everything we'd want in a sequel, with the PvE announcement being a major centerpiece. Because up to this point, the only thing Overwatch really lacked was lore. The lore was always relatively stagnant, and the bits that were given were so good. The peaks were unbelievably high. So to get an announcement that we're going to be getting highly replayable story campaign hero missions with skill trees sounded almost too good to be true. But there was a catch. With anything that appears to be too good to be true, it usually is. The first signs of the inevitable shitstorm. With the production of Overwatch 2 actively occurring within the background, there are going to be some slowdowns. And that would come with the announcement that after the release of Echo on April 14th of 2020, there would be no further content updates to Overwatch 1. This marked the calm before the storm, as not only would there be zero content updates until Overwatch 2 released, but Echo was also a character they had planned for Overwatch 2, basically giving it to us as a here, damn. A final bit to chew on before a 2-year abandonment from Blizzard. From this point forward, as an Overwatch 1 player, it was rough, and is why what inevitably happened with Overwatch 2 has gone down this poorly. The game was basically kept alive with the hype of Overwatch 2 and the promises that were made. If you were playing Overwatch from 2020 to the release of Overwatch 2 in late 2022, you know it was tough. Patch notes were still there, but there really wasn't anything there for those who weren't just addicted to the gameplay and the competition of the game. I don't even remember playing it this time, just a memory of how much weight there was on the release of the second game. Everything hinged on that Overwatch 2 drop and the promise Blizzard made to deliver an effective sequel. And finally, for those who know what happened, the actual shitstorm began. Before Overwatch 2 even dropped in late 2022, the dev team had already internally killed the hero missions, a very premature end to the promise by the team. In interviews with members of the team, they disclosed that there were many problems with the production of PvE, such as overambitious ideas and conflicts with the existing PvP. A large part of the cancellation also came from Blizzard higher-ups also pushing projects back, showing no faith in the PvE. Execs would often push back almost completed works, citing a lack of Blizzard quality, whatever the fuck that means, forcing an endless loop of decisions over and over again, resulting in the eventual cancellation. This is also not considering internal problems within Blizzard and the workplace that happened during the development of Overwatch 2. In 2021, the original game director for Overwatch, Jeff Kaplan, had left the development team likely over differences in the game's direction. Later that same year, Blizzard also had a lawsuit filed against them by the California Civil Rights Department. This follows allegations of an unhealthy, frat-like work environment, discriminating against women working or looking to work within the company. And then in 2023, Microsoft acquired the company and initiated layoffs within the company. All of these largely combined with the pre-existing problems with development contributed to the plug being pulled early on such an important aspect of what should have been the game's success. But this cancellation wasn't disclosed to the public at the time, so the game dropped without it. But that's alright, since in June of 2022, it was announced Overwatch 2 would drop as a free-to-play game with new microtransactions and a new Battle Pass system. Wow! By the way, former CEO of Blizzard, Bobby Kotick, used to get video game advice from guess who? Jeffrey Epstein. Don't believe me? Here's an email where he humbly advises Bobby on indoctrinating children into the economy using video games and microtransactions in 2013. Jeffrey Epstein and Bobby Kotick are the reason we have microtransactions and corporate greed in video games. This shit crazy. Since the originally announced hero missions were cancelled, instead of wasting the work, they were going to be releasing story missions. A big difference, hold on. So despite launching without hero missions, there would at least be some form of PvE within the game, right? Story missions released in August of 2023 with Season 6 of Overwatch 2. It was straight ass cheeks. No skill tree, no real replayability, and on top of that, if you wanted to play it at all, you had to pay real money. You couldn't even try it a little bit before deciding if you actually wanted to spend money. I would show you some gameplay, but I frankly refuse to pay money for this, so instead, I'm just going to show you the trailer. And there's a good reason for that. These story missions were received so poorly that they were legit cancelled for poor sales. No one wants to pay for a half-baked meal when they were promised a full course. And second, I could use that money to instead buy some cheap windshield wipers for my car, which I did.
Came out here to show my windshield wipers working, but my fluid isn't working now. My wipers work, but the fluid isn't coming out. Fuck.
To this day, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, pay for and play these story missions, they are permanently regulated to a small section of the game's UI, thrown in the corner to be forgotten. But that's not the end. Overwatch 2 continued for over 3 years without PvE. And though its reputation is essentially in the dumpster with the general public compared to what it used to be, it somewhat gained and continued to foster a strong community despite those who left, what ultimately pushed the Overwatch team over the edge to drop the 2. Well, after the failure of PvE and the shitstorm died down, the Overwatch 2 rebrand was legitimately just Overwatch 1 with 5v5, a larger than normal content update with a new game mode and maps, and a new microtransaction system. You would think that with the pulling of the plug on PvE early, that the PvP and the rest of the game would come out clean and without controversy. Yet that's the exact opposite of what happened. Skins became way more expensive, and for those who thought, that's okay, I'll get the skins through loot boxes from playing, they removed those too. Forced open all the ones that you had been saving up.
They opened my boxes!
Then 2 years later, brought them back anyway because they realized that shit was stupid as hell. New heroes that came with Overwatch 2 were initially locked behind the battle pass, and very often on release, these heroes would be very strong. So if you actually wanted to have fun during the new update, unless you wanted to grind out 10 hours on the battle pass for the hero, you'd likely be spending $10 on the pass with shit you don't care about. They reverted this too, by the way, because again, it was also dumb as hell. Corporate greed aside, even the gameplay had problems. More features were missing than were added, like loot boxes, on fire, account level, looking for group, and end game voting were all removed in the transition to Overwatch 2, which may seem weird to a lot of new Overwatch 2 players, since most of these features are in the game now. This is because after removing all of these features, they later drip fed them back to us as new features. On Fire returned, and account levels got replaced by a granted better hero progression system, and endgame voting is returning in the new Overwatch rebrand. So much of this was missing on launch, and for quite literally zero reason. Like, there was zero reason to remove it on Fire. It was literally in the game, still in the background, and characters would literally say their on Fire voice line still. It's a small thing, but it made zero sense from any perspective as to why it got removed. A big change advertised for the PvP aspect was to switch to 5v5 gameplay. This switch was with the removal of a tank, making the game from 6v6 with 2 heroes of each role to there only being 1 tank. The intention of this was to make the game faster, taking away CC from teams since tanks held a lot of CC within their kit. Essentially, it was to make the game look less like this.
Reloading.
Can I fly? But while this worked in some ways, now there was a new problem. Since 1 tank on each team was removed, this meant that there was less spreading of damage. Basically, instead of there being 2 tanks for the DPS and supports to shoot, there was now only 1 to take all the damage. And since there was only 1 tank, all tanks got buffed, also making them the most important role. So people very quickly figured out how important countering the 1 tank on the enemy team was. Before, having 2 tanks negated this issue, since you could have your other tank switch to support you. Enemy Bastion, have your Diva Matrix him off. Getting blown up as soon as you engage in a fight, have a Zarya bubble. Now, whenever there's a counter, The easiest solution isn't to play around the problem and coordinate a solution. It's to play a game of chicken, switching back and forth until the game either ends or somebody breaks and gives up. And even though the tank experience became noticeably more miserable, DPS and supports also argued in favor as well, since with the tank buffs, the tanks essentially became super tanks that have way more health while also having a lot of damage. So despite the fact that this change happened for a pretty decent reason, even that didn't go over smoothly. But at least now 6v6ers can play open queue whenever they're missing Ryan Zarya combos. That's better than nothing. What else was better than nothing was also the addition of 3 new heroes on the launch of Overwatch 2. Since the devs had abandoned Overwatch 1 for around 2 years, there was at least a solid bit of new content. We got Kiriko, Sojourn, and Junker Queen as new heroes, and while Sojourn and Junker Queen had their own problems at launch, especially Sojourn, let's talk about this one. Kiriko has always been contentious in regard to her fairly overloaded kit. In my last video, I talked about mobility creep as a form of power creep, and though power creep in general is a fairly debatable topic regarding Overwatch, if any hero in Overwatch really marked a jump in power, it is Kiriko. Though she is still good to this day and has always stayed relevant since her release, she was way worse on release than before. Without getting too specific, since this isn't meant to be an ability analysis on Kiriko and her history, on launch her kit was very strong, much stronger than it is even now. On top of the teleport she continues to have being the first of its kind in the game, her ultimate used to give a 3 times ability cooldown reduction, and her Suzu used to cleanse all forms of CC and status with a longer immortality when Suzu'd. For reference, on launch, you could hit the fattest shatter of your life and Kiriko could just teleport it and cleanse it all while also making you invincible for around 1 second. But it's okay though because she sells a lot of skins. Safe to say with all this combined, even balance-wise, Overwatch 2's launch was controversial within the community. Not only on a casual level were features that were previously present missing for no reason, but even competitively the game lacked the balance that was supposed to be fixed, since the removal of one problem unfortunately came new ones. So why change the name back to Overwatch? Why drop the 2? After all they've done to rebuild, everything we just talked about, from the announcement of Overwatch 2 to the release, happened over 3 years ago now. A lot has happened since then, from the loss of the Overwatch League and a large part of the community to an almost rebuilt fanbase and a new Overwatch esports scene in the OWCS, which I haven't mentioned since it could almost be its own video entirely. The game has a lot more going for it again, on top of an improved and balanced gameplay with hero additions and updates. In the past, dropping the 2 would essentially be Blizzard and the Overwatch dev team admitting failure, that this relaunch was nothing short of a disaster brand-wise and gameplay-wise. But now with there actually being real competition for Overwatch in the hero shooter genre, and the game's reputation in recent times having been stained with the launch of its sequel all those years ago, it makes more sense than ever for the game to reinvent itself to compete in an ever competitive market, with more eyes on the genre than ever. And what a way to reinvent itself with 5 new heroes, a revamping of the lore, and a return of missing features, and a collab that, while might not be my thing, would undoubtedly do well for the game. This is what many of us have wanted out of Overwatch for a long time, and if part of this is to look back, admit the failures of before, and move on, I for one am definitely on board. If you made it to the end of the video, I want to thank you so much for watching. I just finished editing. If you like this video, hit that subscribe. We're on the way to 1,000 subs. We pushing it, you know what I mean? All support is really appreciated. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. How do you feel about the switch on the Overwatch branding? What do you feel about the new season? Check me out on Twitch, TOP_YYC. We play in Overwatch, sometimes some Deadlock, but mostly Overwatch. You're gonna be trying to push for some champ this season. We're gonna be trying to push for champ or high GM or something dope like that. But yeah, I know around 6 p.m. MST start. And yeah, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video, and have a great day. Thank you.